I'm born in Colombia, in Bogota, Colombia, when I was around 18, 19 years old. After finishing high school, I went to study in Manchester. I did a small electronic music course. It's called SSR. I tried to look for something related with sound, with music there, but there wasn't really much going on there. So after a little while, I went to the UK. I did an audio engineering degree in SAE. I finished my audio engineering degree there. A few years after, I got invited to play in Berlin, Bar 25. This went really well. Around that time, I was a little bit fed up with London, with the London sound scene, whatever you want to call it. Anyways, there was nothing holding me back there. And a friend of mine, the guy who invited me to play at Bar 25, Red Robin, one of the residents there. He said to me that if I wanted to move to Berlin, I could use, he had like a small spare room in his house. I took him on the offer and I came to Berlin. And since then I haven't looked back. I love this place. So yeah, music is my life. My first interaction with dance music must have been in high school as all the kids, but like, I started like going to raves here and there and I thought, wow, this is amazing. I've been already crazy about me. Go back to what really got me hooked up in music is that guy over there, Michael Jackson. One of my cousins who I really looked up to at the time. I was 8, 9 years old and he was like 15, 16. He used to live in New York. We were in my grandmother's house and he pulls out a bat vinyl to my grandma's. I don't know what I was doing there. And since then I got really, really crazy about Michael Jackson. From then until I had my first cassette, I just like listened over and over. Started like getting really into like how music worked in the sense of like I had one of these Sony Walkmans with that you had like a little equalizer in it, and I was loving like killing the bass and putting it back. And I'm a kind of guy that has like a, for good or for bad, a very addictive personality. I get really like sucked into stuff. Some good, some bad. Yeah, just music sucked me in completely. From Michael Jackson, it kind of like evolved into like funk. I started listening to a lot of the funkadelic stuff and hip hop. Hip hop was a very big thing for me. When I was a little kid in Colombia, all the guys in school were listening to Guns N' Roses and Nirvana. This was like the popular thing, but I somehow got like really in love with hip hop. And I'm talking about like the Chronic and Doggy Style and all this stuff. This sound like really completely like I fell in love with it. So since a little kid, every single I was gonna say penny, but we don't use pennies there. Pesos that I had was put into saving money until I could get some together so that I can order a CD. And first I was ordering stuff from Snoop Dogg and all this sort of stuff, making a record collection, which then evolved to a more like a dramatic addiction, which is all the synthesizers and so on. Yeah, so that's who I am. I'm born to two Colombian people, which still live in Colombia, from a very small family, at least mine. I have a little sister that lives in Sydney, and I moved to Europe quite early, and I've been here first in London. Now I'm in Berlin for maybe over 13 years. I have a German passport and so on, but still Colombian inside. My first synth drum machine, actually it's a synth drum machine. I love it so much. I bought it in London in this website called Gumtree, and it was an Electric EMX, and it was actually that one right there. Yeah, it's one of my favorite pieces of gear. Even after I've had all these other synthesizers, this is one of like the main things that you could probably hear in all my tracks. Yeah, I love this. I knew that I wanted to integrate having a machine, just coming out of only the box. I have a lot of respect for Korg. I think they do really cool things. And I don't know, I guess maybe somebody talked about it and I just looked into it and I found a good deal. And I went and I got it from the guy. I still have the box, I have everything. And it's so resistant. It's been with me for maybe like 20 years. And it's perfect, it's really made of it's a tank. Actually, in a flight somewhere, I remember looking outside the window from the plane and I saw one of these guys just like smash it, and I thought it would be gone. That's it. And later I'll show you. And it's made of steel and it has like a big thing there, but it's impeccable. Works perfect. For the music production, well, the thing is like we have to divide the music production and the DJing. I started DJing in Colombia much before I went to the UK and so on, when I was about 17 years old or something. And my absolute biggest influence, and I could say without any doubt, was this guy. His artist name is J-Way. His name is Jairo. So this is my biggest influence, definitely Jairo, J-Way, Colombian guy. Yeah, afterwards I really respect what Ricardo does and Sip, and there's a lot of guys that I really have big respect for. But this guy was like a big influence who actually like came to me in some after hours and so on, and he was the one who told me you should mix just with the pitch, and he showed me, and I was blew my mind, and since then I like started doing this, and anyways, when there's no get too technical, there was just something about him that the technique, the mixing, everything was so outstanding. In the production side of things, I had the teachers in my school in Manchester and teachers in London. In Manchester, it was more dance music orientated, but in London, it was an audio engineering degree, so I was also learning how to mic up instruments and work with these beer consoles, and you know, you have a few months of like mathematics at the beginning. You're like, what? As like a mentor or big influence, I met a guy in London. His name is Pete Lazenby. The track was called Sacred Cycles. Anyways, everyone played this. This was back at the time that you could make a lot of money out of a big track. I remember he telling me all the stories, like, you know, like when this came out, he was just like, loaded, this doesn't happen anymore. And we became good friends. We started making music together. So if I learned things in the music production side of things, it was Pete Lazenby. And now he has a project and it's called Padre. Really, really outstanding guy. He apart from being a very good friend, he does a lot of classical stuff. So he's really musically trained, singing in some choirs, and he taught me a lot of things. And he taught me how to use equalizers and compressors and this and that. So technically, he would have been my biggest influence. My friend Red Robin, so he invited me to play at his birthday party in Bar 25, which went really, really, really well. I think at that party, in the crowd, there was the woman that used to run an agency where my ex-girlfriend was working for. The agency was called Play Coola. This is Tanya Capeluti. And she saw me playing there, and she said she really liked it and so on. And a few months after, they had a Play Coola showcase at Club Visionaire. And DJ T was supposed to play on that party, and he canceled. And Tanya told Danny, my ex-girlfriend, that why don't you ask your boyfriend to come and fill in the slot. Now, this was at the time I was working in a really cool music studio in London, Alpha Centauri, and I had work the next day. It was not easy, you know, like, you know, book your flight one day to another, like, but I thought, wow, Club de Visionaire, like, I'm there, I don't care if I lose my job or whatever. And of course I take it. I had to pay some really expensive flights because it was the next day, and they told me, like, you know, the fee is probably not going to be very big. It's a showcase. It was very likely that I could not cover my costs of coming for playing there. Other than that, the forecast was heavy rain. So like, it was very likely that the party would get canceled. I would lose my money from the job in London. But I thought I have to take this chance. You know, I back then, like many years ago, but I knew what Club de Visionaire was and what special place in the world and for underground music and so on. I said, I do it, I don't care. I at least try. If I lose the money, I lose it. If I lose my job, I lose it. And I came to play at the party. Yeah, the guy who was supposed to play it after me or before. Anyway, somebody like wanted to stop playing earlier and asked me if I could like just carry on. The party went on fire, and then I had to play like a 2-hour set, but it ended up being like an 8 or 9 hour set. And this was my first gig at the Club Visionaire. There's some videos online. I looked like a little boy, you know, like I looked like 15. And then this was the day that I met my good friend Gregor, who runs Club Visionaire in Apotose. From then we clicked. We became very good friends. Gregor is probably the guy who's helped me the most in my career. Apart from being a very good friend, a loyal person, generous, he's really, really like, you know, it's thanks to him that I am like somewhere doing whatever. So he believed in me, he really liked it, it was super nice. And then he offered to pay for my flights and so on, which was a big relief also for me. You know, I didn't get like a huge fee, but he said, I will take care of this and stuff. And he did, and this was really nice. Then it also made me look good to the agency because, you know, like, okay, this kid is actually all right. And I remember that after this, I basically went back to London with a big smile on my face, but I was in London. And then it was a few months after, or a while after, that Robin told me this thing that about, like, you know, like, if you actually really want to come here, I offer you my room, which I'm very grateful for. You know, I wouldn't have been able to come here if it wasn't for him. Then when he said this, I think on the same day or even in the same phone call, I said, like, man, if you're serious about it, pack my shit and I'm there. And I did, and I came, and it was like the best decision in my life. I have to say he's also one of the people that helped me a lot here. So he connected me to a lot of people, and I got to know many different key people in the industry here. But just as I came in here, one of the first things I did was I went to Club de Visionaire, and then I saw my friend Gregor, and I told him about the stuff, and I'm moving to Berlin and so on. And he told me, like, cool, let's arrange a party. And I'm like, yeah, anytime, please. I would love to play here. And funny enough, that's when I would say, I need to look it up at the date, but it must be about more than 13 years. He didn't ask me to play at the party. He called me after we had this conversation, and he said to me, who do you want to play with? And I didn't expect this question. He said, what do you care who I want to play with? Like, I come and play. He said, yeah, but who would you like to play with? And I thought, like, well, you know, then just like give me a few hours, I make some phone calls, I check who's here, and I let you know. And so then he wanted me to organize a party, which for me was a surprise. And I organized the party. I invited a good friend of mine, which at the time we knew each other, but we were not like close friends. We became very close friends. My friend Argenis Brito. But the party went great. And after this party, I think most of the times I've just done my parties. And then after a certain amount of time, I thought, like, well, it would make sense to give it a name to the party. And after a while, I called the party Meltdown, which still runs now. So it's been over a decade of meltdowns in Club de Visionaire. And I've met a lot of these like interesting artists who like, I guess definitely also influence a little bit what I do. So that's then how like my Club de Visionaire thing started going. Since that first party, I've been playing regularly there until now, and I hope to play there until my last days. I, for example, I'm very fond of Sip and also Margaret Diggers. Argenis is, for example, maybe just like I mentioned, Pete Lazenby in the UK. In Berlin, he's probably one of the artists that I've worked with that has also like helped me a lot in terms of like he's one of the guys that has also influenced and helped me in my music production. Many years ago, before my time for sure, before my time in Berlin, May Day here is like this tradition, and yeah, every 1st of May, Ricardo and Sip and Margaret and Sammy D and all these guys are there. If you think about it, or like if you have a look at some of these lineups, these are lineups for like a big festival. So every 1st of May, you know that he will be there, and along with Sip and so on, and they do this really long sets, and it's just a big, it's a big thing that has been going on for many years. There's the canal, where there's water. I've experienced it a couple of times. I don't know why they don't do it now, or they haven't done it, or they do it or not. But they put this like stuff that floats in the water. So they extend the dance floor. You're dancing on top of the water. It's very good. Highly recommended. Mostly it was music that like got me like Berlin is the place, in the sense that like the sound that I was playing back in the time when I got invited for the first time, it was well received in London, but here people loved it. It went really well. The stuff that I really liked, people really liked here. So I thought, fuck, it should be here. And also around that time, the London scene and the music was going in a direction that I really didn't like. It was going for more of this like disco house and stuff, and I just like my underground kind of like stuff that I still like. And for me it was like, okay, they like my stuff here. I should go there if I can. And also like, we're talking about 13, 14 years ago. It was cheap here. There was all these cool clubs. And also like one thing that really got me in love with the city was like the way people are so relaxed. Everyone is in the same thing, and everybody's minding their own business, you know? Like, I don't know if you've sat here sometimes like, especially like on a weekend, on a train, you see like, oh, the craziest people, but everybody's like kind of like respectful, you know? Like, for example, in London has for me like, and I'm very also grateful to the UK for the years that I was there and so on, but London has this more like a fast vibe, more stress. People are more, here everything's just chill. Not as much as it was before, I have to say. It's changed a lot. it's changed a lot. And Berlin is not cheap anymore. And Berlin is, I still love it, but it's not the Berlin that it was back in when I came. And I understand, and I'm sure that even a few years earlier, it was like even more like artist friendly and stuff. Like artist friendly in the sense that like you have so many DJs and artists and this and that here, because you don't need a fortune to leave, you know, like so the artists that had a couple of dates, gigs or whatever, or you had a little bit of income, you could live in an okay manner. I don't think it is possible anymore, but it was just the perfect place where you did without having to earn too much money. Then you could like focus on your passion, you know. Now it's changed a lot, but it's still, you know, in comparison to, I don't know, I guess Paris or London, it's still like, it's completely different story. It was just a place where I could do my thing, what I love, and like make a kind of living out of it. In the work scenario, with things related to what I do with music, I guess the first job that I had related with this was at Native Instruments. 6 to 10 months, I was working in the Tracto department, doing an internship as a product manager. I've done some work for Sequentics, the guys who make a Circlone, which is basically it's the main, let's say this controls the whole studio. It's probably the best analog sequencer that there is, like by far. After purchasing my first Circlone, I remember telling Colin, the guy who runs the company, that I would love to work there, whatever it is. And at some point he called me, and I started working, doing some very basic work, just like with the assembly. I was really proud of working for a company that makes the sequencer that runs my whole studio, and like have a very, very, very big respect for him, for the company. And also, other than that, I work in a jazz club. I do sound engineering there. And there I've had the chance to meet a lot of really big jazz guys. I love jazz, by the way. Yeah, I didn't mention jazz before, but I'm really into jazz, and I do the sound there. Basically, I'm the sound engineer. What this means is I will meet the band and then mic up according to whichever setup. This gives me the chance of listening to some amazing jazz and meeting a lot of the people, a lot of the musicians. I like to sample a lot of jazz in my music. So getting closer to the actual people that make the music, it's a great thing, which I haven't exploited yet so much. I've done a little bit. I've had friends play, you know, like professionals play things in my tracks, which I then like put through things like the Circlone, and then I tweak them and so on, and this is great. Obviously, like you have a lot more control and a lot more possibilities than sampling it from a record. So yeah, these are my main things as jobs, and also as a teacher. I used to, back in London, I was working at Point Blank, and I did a teacher training course. I worked in a couple of schools, and I also did here, and not so much at the moment, but I worked as a music production teacher, and I also do lessons here and then privately, and I'm planning to again pick it up. So yeah, work-wise, this is the things that I've worked related to music. I wouldn't say that every time I start something differently, because that's not true. You know, I don't like think, okay, I have to do it differently every time. But I don't have like a certain workflow where I go like, okay, first step this. I guess one of the things that like it's like a starting point for me for a track is when if I hear like a nice riff or a nice hook or a nice solo somewhere that I think, wow, this could work really well if it's shifted, and I start putting in my brain like what happens if I tweak this here and there, and if I can hear something, if I can imagine something being a part of a track. Or many times I am listening to a jazz record and then there's this particular sound that I'm like, fuck, this would really sound cool in the track, maybe with some processing, some effects or whatever. The same happened with the vocal. I really like to put vocal samples, but more than vocals themselves, as in like people singing. I really like the sound of interesting voices, especially also when the topic is, when it's saying something interesting. I had a track that I did with my friend who's next door, Mike Yells. We have a project called Billie Jean. I have a track with an interview from Resident Advisor. They're talking to Quincy Jones, and he has a really thick, nice voice. So then I really get excited with this stuff, and I cut it, and I look for the words, and I put it together, and I warp it so that it's saying something that makes sense. So yeah, anything that really captures my attention could be a starting point of the track. If I hear something really cool that I could just imagine, like, wow, this could like really open up a track, then yeah, it could really be anything. I guess the best advice for the new generation is look back, because I don't, like it's a bit arbitrary to say, or you can't generalize so much. But in my own opinion, just music these days, for me, or at least the kind of music that I listen to, it's just going downhill. If you listen to the music that was put out in the 90s, you had like Madonna, you had Michael Jackson, you had Prince, you had like these guys that like are absolutely incredible. There was so much good quality of music. And I'm talking again about, so for example, I've talked about Beastie Boys, which I really respect, and I think they're amazing. If you look at them, then look at who they sampled, and then you go back to like all this like funk records and all this like really all disco records and stuff. This is where the real talent is. This is where the gold is. Like, I would say to the newer generations, look back, because there's not really much to look at this moment, at least in my opinion. So if you see Michael Jackson, I'm a big fan, as I've already kind of expressed a few times. If you look at Michael Jackson's early records, there's just nothing compared to this. You don't have any Thriller these days, or Bad, or Dangerous. Nothing goes anywhere near the quality that this guy was doing, or the stuff that Prince was doing. Or like, if you look at hip hop from like, the Chronic and all these like old albums of the first things from like Wu-Tang and so on, this is where the real like raw, the really special thing is happening. And I don't know what it is, or if it's just that I'm getting really old, but you look at the sound of it and the way it's made, and it just doesn't have that soul anymore. It doesn't have that personality, and I don't mean it only with Michael Jackson and Wu-Tang or whatever. I mean it in terms of like even different genres. I'm not really a big rock guy or metal or whatever. But I could appreciate, like all these early Metallica albums and all these early Nirvana albums, and like, this is not my thing, but it had something special. I don't know how to explain it myself. Do your research for all the younger generations, but these records were amazing, and then if you look at Michael Jackson looked at James Brown, and you listen to this music, and it has this magic. Who is James Brown today? There is no James Brown. There is nobody who has this like, they're like gods, So that would be my advice to the younger generations. Look back, because that's where the good shit is. For me, the future of the scene is a tricky one. I don't want to be negative. I think the scene, at least this electronic music scene, it's going like this. If you know what I mean, like nobody cares about the music. Nobody cares about the quality of the music. People are caring about the likes and the how many followers and like how many plays and how many. The music is just like really like not important anymore. I think the quality of music and not on just only on this scene and so on is really like going downhill. The perception of music and where it's going, and like who's good and who's bad, or who's not so talented, or whatever the right word is to use, is just completely going in different directions. Now you don't need to be a good music producer. You need to be a good at making video content and like knowing how to sell yourself and buying likes here and there and making yourself look cool on the video in this few seconds. You don't need to make good music. Good music is like, or like, a talent or whatever you want to call it, is secondary. Now you just need to you need to know about marketing. You need to know how to create video content. You need to know the algorithms. You need to know so much shit that has nothing to do with music. It would be nice if people would just go back into what really made an artist, which was the end product of what they do.